Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining the session, Looking Out for the Little Guy, Ensuring Equity for Small Farmers.
Thank you, and thank you for coming to this portion of the Mid-Atlantic Summit, EPA Mid-Atlantic Summit, and a brief history in reference to what actually is going on. We had some information about, and I don't know if everyone knows about this, but the Homestead Act of 1862. The Homestead Act was called the Great Land Grab, and it basically geared to white Americans and also immigrants that wanted to settle in this country. This was basically signed during the Civil War by President Lincoln, and it basically held out the land from free Black people and also Asians, and over 4 million homestead claims and over 1.6 million deeds were settled in these 30 states. The Morrill Act, which was basically an act that enabled land grant colleges, and these in three primary subjects, military science and also engineering and agriculture. These schools were basically geared to actually help the settlers that did not know anything about agriculture to actually give them classes, and also settle the county extension agency in reference to help them further their agricultural endeavors and teach them how to actually farm. We leapfrog into the after the Korean War and the Civil Rights era. The Civil Rights era basically was a situation where we had mostly more foreclosures due to the farming, the conflict in the South, and the same people that actually were on these farming boards were the same people that basically were in the they controlled the South in grants, and knowing this, they basically had more foreclosures during that era. And we move up to October the 12th, where Land and Chemicals and Redevelopment Division had their first Voice of the Farmer. And it was meticulously crafted by April Bowie, Debbie Moody, and myself. And it was a tribute to hardworking minority farmers. And it was aimed at highlighting their contribution to overlooked racial bias. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ralph Brogdon. I'm a project officer with Land and Chemicals Division Group, Region 3, and I want to welcome you to the program. I have two special guests today, Deputy Undersecretary Gloria Montano Greene, USDA Farm Production and Conservation. Undersecretary Greene was appointed Deputy Undersecretary for the USDA Farm Production and Conservation Mission Area on February the 22nd, 2021. Her experiences focus on government and community work, includes federal policy, advocacy, intergovernmental relations, communications, and management. Deputy Undersecretary Greene leads the USDA Farm Production and Conservation, which provides programs and services for farmers, ranchers, and agricultural producers. These programs include farm loans, conservation, disaster assistance, and crop insurance and price support. Deputy Undersecretary Greene is a former state executive director for the Farm Service Agency in Arizona. where she led implementation of the 2014 Farm Bill. She is a proud graduate of the University of Arizona. Our next speaker is Ms. Wanda Johnson, State Program Assistant for Small Farms Outreach Program. She once served as County Extension Agent with Virginia State and Virginia Tech. She aims to educate and train community members to grow or support locally produced food for the adults and youth. Her current projects include developing permaculture community gardens for Forest, for Chase City, Mecklenburg, Virginia County. Past projects include community gardens demonstration at Randolph Farm, Virginia State University for 4 weeks. The program extended for 4 weeks, and it included youth and also adults.
Wanda
Wanda,
having
is
a
Wanda on?
challenge getting in. We are still working with her, but you may continue.
Okay. All right. Gloria, I had met you at the Delaware State Black Farmers Convention at Delaware State. And we were actually talking in the hallway in reference to, what actually is, your accountability as far as what the Black farmers and people of color find challenging to actually today. And if you could expound on that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation. So I know you gave a great overview. I'm with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. U.S. Department of Agriculture does many things: food nutrition, forest work, research, engagement, food safety, animal, plant health, etc. I'm with Farm Production and Conservation. So that's most commonly known for you to Farm Service Agency, Natural Resources Conservation Services, crop insurance work, with our public-private partnership agency, risk management. So we touch every state and territories of the United States. So we have over 2,400 offices. So most likely wherever you are sitting, there is a county office related to USDA FPAC there. I think maybe I'll take a double step back, right? So we've been doing equity quite a bit within USDA under the leadership of Secretary Vilsack and with this administration. Kind of came in day one. Very clear for us, it is not something to add on or extra work. It is central to the work that we do. We have to be able to figure out how are we building, rebuilding, or maintaining trust and confidence with our stakeholders and our partners in the work that we do. How do we make sure that we are a people's department? How do we look at, recognize and identify past discriminations? But that means we have to identify and understand what are the root parts of those discriminations. How do we think about equitable access? How do we remove barriers? Sometimes that's us removing them from the inside out, while organizations, partners, stakeholder groups, and farmers are telling us what are the needs to best engage. And then fundamentally, how are we thinking about education and outreach? I think there's a lot of concerns of individuals that might be in different parts of where they are in agriculture. Some might have been doing it for 10 years and are wanting to think about making it into a formal business and it becomes their primary income. Some are considering how they are continuing their family legacy of agriculture and farming, and then others are excited about it because of experience they've had in food access within their community. But ultimately, one of the largest barriers is everything's complicated. And we have lots and lots of programs. And the reason we have various programs is because there's various aspects of agriculture that are needed. So the more information you have, and I think this happens at EPA as well, right? The more information you have, sometimes the more complicated it becomes for folks. Or sometimes the information is like, how do we do scenarios? So education and outreach has been, and through technical assistance, has been a really key component while we look at redesigning and rethinking about the programs within USDA. So I'm going to use one example, Ralph, so if I can just go from there.
Okay.
Farm loans is a key component of the work. There has been a lot of historical thoughts on what farm loan is, right? Some class action lawsuits and then just pressures of it. It's your major focus of ag financing. If you don't have access to ag financing, the ability to stay, to grow, to do investments, to do ownership could be impacted. While we are not at USDA the entire ag financing portfolio we are a huge component of it for those that are socially disadvantaged, underserved, smaller producers, new and beginning producers, veterans, etc. One of the things, it was a very complicated program. It was like very intense. So while we have to deal with our past work and our the past discrimination that has existed, we have to be able to also think about improving programs, removing any type of discrepancy that could create discrimination. So we have worked pretty aggressively on farm lending with this administration. The Biden-Harris administration under Secretary Vilsack, we have simplified the direct loan paper application. It went from being 29 pages to 13 pages. We now have a way for you to have an online system to be able to pay. We have created different tools for loan assistance to be able to provide that direct education so folks can have, I don't want to say empower, because empower means that people didn't have power, but that people have another access to be able to understand education, that they have questions so they can be best equipped when they're going to go and pursue their loan. And then complement that with technical assistance, because I'm really honored that I was invited to be part of here, but sometimes you don't want to hear from somebody that says, I'm with the federal government, I'm with the state government, I'm with the city government. You might want to hear from somebody that is with a partner organization or a nonprofit, a nonprofit or a university. And that's where you want to hear the information, because that's who your most trusted advisor is. And so we've been investing in that technical assistance for folks to be able to say, here's what I understand is different. Here's what I understand some of the options are for you to consider. And how do I help you learn and navigate USDA and bring them along with us while they're meeting us in our county office and beginning that trust relationship. So I think it's like in two ways. How do you think about the policy and the program improvement, but also how do you think about the delivery and the engagement that matches that? Because ultimately, both of those are important to be able to think about access.
Right. And, I kind of feel that, a lot of people don't understand as far as the diversity as far as within the department of the USDA, and also the different departments that are actually within the, and what do they actually do and how do they support the farmer or rancher that's actually out there. It wasn't until I tried to get a farm number, basically I did not understand as far as what departments did what. And that's, my next question in reference to the different departments within USDA that actually undertake, that support of the farmer or rancher that's actually out there that's applying for the loan itself. And I was wondering if you could explain that, the different departments that actually take care of that.
Yep. So the most direct departments and agencies that help directly with farmers and are what we call producer facing, and producer being farmers, ranchers, private forest landers, our Farm Service Agency, Natural Resources Conservation Services, and then the risk management agents as they oversee crop insurance work. So the most important thing is your relationship starts with Farm Service Agency. You just shared that getting a farm track number or getting a farm record, that's your most important key. Because if you are in our traditional programs, or if you are being hit by disaster, already having that relation, like, you know, like a drought or a tornado or a hurricane, right? We have recovery items to help you with your loss, but you want to have a relationship with your FSA office before that, so we can make sure that we are prepared. So that's
So,
your most key, is Farm
right,
Service Agency. And
right.
then if you're wanting conservation practices and conservation support, how are you maintaining your health? How are you thinking about improved irrigation practices, et cetera? That recover crops, that relationship is with NRCS. And you'll go, some of these offices are co-located, sometimes they're not, but majority of them are. And you come into the office and we can begin that relationship. But you will require farm record and farm track information. And that really is kind of government work, right? That you need to be able to say, who is this person? Some individuals will come in to farm, and some will come in with their respective entity or LLC, or how they decide to designate and engage. So that's the first one. The other is there are funding that USDA provides through other components. So the National Institute of Funding, Food and Agriculture, the Agricultural Marketing Services, Food and Nutrition Program, they might have funding that they give to states. And then states are then working with farmers to be able to have those relationships. Organic Block Grant, or the Local Food and Marketing Program, which is going to states, and states have to get that fund, and they're the distributors of it. So that's not to cause another complication, right? But some of those are very explicitly state block grants on how you sign up, because the way that people get food and access is really still connected to how a farmer is taking care of an FPAC. So whereas the Agriculture Marketing Services, maybe if I could take a step back, is USDA has 8 mission areas. So 8 pieces of a pie, right? And each piece of a
Right.
pie has got some great parts to it. And sometimes they might Congress will give them specific money to be able to do things. And they'll be informed with farmers and ranchers work that we do at FPAC. But the way that they give money might be to an ag extension, for example, the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, they give money directly to an ag extension. That's not something that FPAC does. But we are aware of it, so we can make sure and ask the farmers, have you talked to the ag extension for questions you might have about what upcoming trends are, education and collaboration, but it's not money that I'm paying from within FPAC or direct dollars. So it's like a resource that's supported, like the National Institute of Food and Agriculture is funding a farm stress network. That doesn't mean if you call the USDA FSA office, they'll be able to reference and help you find that. But the ag extensions themselves are promoting, because they have a different education and outreach and engagement components, and they're layering it in there, or they're providing specific training and support. So Ralph, I don't mean to not answer the question. I think it's just more of, if you're wanting to get a farm loan, if you're wanting to register your farm, if you're wanting to make sure that you are enrolling in an EQIP program or getting a water improvement or cover crop, start your relationship at FSA and NRCS. But USDA does fund other programs besides Farm Service Agency and NRCS that will help a farmer.
Okay. I see Wanda Johnson has joined us. Wanda, are you there?
Hello there. How are you?
We're fine, Wanda. I'm glad you actually joined us, and I have a
Well,
question for you.
yes.
Okay. What is County Extension doing at Virginia State that involves as far as young Black farmers?
As far as young Black farmers, I think we're doing the same thing that we do for all farmers, but particularly with young Black farmers, as we do with the Small Farm Outreach Program. We take them through an orientation program, and that orientation program is designed to help them understand exactly what is required to run an efficient and effective farm. They are given trainings, opportunities to attend workshops, field days, all types of trainings and certification programs to help them acquire knowledge and skills as it relates to best practices in agriculture, as it relates to resources available from different agencies and organizations, as it relates to what type of crops to grow and so forth. So those are some of the things that we are doing.
Okay, thank you.
In addition to reaching out to the high schools and doing field days with them, you know, so that we can inform young people about agriculture and farming and production and what's involved with that. And, you know, trying to reach the younger generation as well as working with those who are just beginning to farm.
Ms. Greene, how has the dynamics of employment changed at USDA in reference to the change with Black farmers? Are there any farming or any farmers actually joining USDA in the procurement of, say, employment and lending their expertise out in your organization, and basically what's actually happening?
So there's a few things within the hiring aspect of it. With at USDA, we've been doing it, if you think about it, in the youth recruitment component. We've been doing quite a few investments, not within FPAC, but within USDA. The National Institute of Food and Agriculture has invested in next generation. And so how are we thinking about recruiting, engaging, and collaborating and teaching individuals that agriculture is a career, is an opportunity for them to consider? Those funds also had really explicit targeting and engagement to get minority serving institutions involved to be able to provide and invite folks to participate. So many universities across the country received those funds last summer and are recruiting interns to be able to place them at USDA, to be able to get experience USDA, or to work within community groups. Every single one of them is quite different. The other components that we have is our investments, right? So within FPAC, we've had a huge increase of investments in work that we're doing with 1890 universities and 1990 universities and Hispanic serving institutions. So the 1890s are being the historically Black college universities that are land grant institutions, 1990s or 1994s being like the tribal colleges and universities, and then also Hispanic serving institutions of agriculture, colleges and universities. So HSIs are Department of Education designation, and then HISACU's Hispanic Serving Agriculture College Universities is within within the Department of Agriculture. But a combination of, if we're expecting to have an increase, we have to do better recruitment, right? How are we educating ourselves of where we have gaps, but also educating communities that might not have felt welcome to bring them to the table? So like, for example, with Virginia, we have definitely worked quite a bit, either having our state executive directors for FSA or state committee members to better collaborate in showing up in conversation and when there's possibility to have fund investment. Structurally wise, there's a lot of ways of how representation and decision making happens within Farm Service Agency and Natural Resources Conservation Services. You do have your career employees that are responsible for the programmatic implementation, the planning aspects of it, et cetera. But in Farm Service Agency, you have county committees that are supposed to provide a lot of education and outreach of local knowledge in the county. And in the state, you have the state committees for Farm Service Agency, which also provides a local knowledge of the various diverse agriculture that exists in that respective state. We've been doing a robust recruitment and education, a recruitment to be able to have more minority representation and socially disadvantaged which is a category that we have by statute at FPAC and USDA, sorry, with the Farm Bill since the 80s. So if you'll hear that word come out, socially disadvantaged, it's because that's the statute language which requires move forward. I know BIPOC is used quite a bit, but it's not statutorily covered yet in the conversations. And so within that, that's how local insight and local information is given and shared. We've been moving our county committees to do more education and outreach to be able to share what are these programs and design. Specifically, we've recently launched a pilot of cities for urban and suburban counties committees, and really been rooted in that education and outreach component that they provide to us to change some of our programs to make it accessible to urban and suburban areas, but also to make sure that they are involved in how they're talking to their fellow urban producers to let them know, have you thought about USDA, which might not have been serving urban agriculture before, but has resources for you. And then on NRCS, we have state technical committees and conservation districts. Some of the conservation districts are with the National Association of Conservation Districts. We've been working with them, and what is their equity plan? What is their equity engagement? How are they looking at agriculture around them and making sure it's better reflected? It's a sustainability model. We've all been talking about sustainability and all the work we do. It's a people sustainability model. So we've been working on how are they better recruiting and making sure representation of what agriculture looks like in their communities are part of their conservation districts, and part of the NRCS State Technical Committee as well.
Right. My next question, and you actually mentioned something about that. It was what are the challenges for urban agriculture at the present time, and what and how are the USDA, I guess, how are they motivated as far as to serve the inner city urban agriculturalists?
Yep. So urban agriculture has had a few investments from us, right? Within the 2018 Farm Bill, and I'll take a step back for those that may not be aware of how USDA runs, is every 5 years, about every 5 years, Congress passes a Farm Bill, which covers everything. And sometimes Congress gives mandatory funds for that work, or just expectations of where there are going to be changes. In the 2018 Farm Bill, they asked for urban county committees to be set up and to be able to have an explicitly investment of urban agriculture. Now, we all know urban agriculture has been in existence way before the 2018 Farm Bill.
Right.
But the existence of how that program is there. So we have been naming those pilot cities that was in the urban ag, and where we've set up county committees. We've also set up staff. So having an urban conservationist is a little bit different. Some of it could be the size of your land is going to be different than what a typical farm has been used to. And some of it could just be the needs are going to be a little bit more because the recovery of the soil and how you have to engage in it, depending on where you're putting your farm.
Right.
So the most fundamental thing was, how do we educate folks to transition what might be zoned? As an urban farmer, I might be growing a half acre in my backyard, but that's not what my local city and county zoning is. So we've had, like, the fundamental part is educating all of our staff is how do you support an urban ag producer to have them come in and have relationships with the office with that farm record initial conversation. And while we have those 10 cities as our urban county, we've actually been doing that training on all of our producers, because I have been in an area in the middle of a very busy city, right, which is deemed an urban agriculture, and then in an area that is probably in a very remote rural community that could be deemed as urban agriculture, because it's maybe that half acre, quarter acre backyard agriculture that's going from potentially a gardening hobby to a business, right? Or being able to transition to urban farming. With the American Rescue Plan, we received about $40 million, actually, I should say, the secretary decided to use $40 million within the food and system transformation to invest in some of those cities that are priority urban ag county communities. To be able to think about how are we educating our producers, how are we outreaching, knowing we might not have that relationship to begin with, and that third party trusted partner and stakeholder is there. I have seen in one state where the person is working on how they engage with us in that state, but also change how their university ag extension is thinking about urban producers. So it's kind of like a ripple effect, a co-benefit that's occurring to be able to change. We have had to look and change some of our policies, right? Some of them are statute changes, but others are, we have to just think that it's okay, and it's not to be able to think about how many row crops you're considering, but actually what are you growing and how are you, how are you needing help for ag? So I think like the question becomes different and how we serve you. And then finally, right, because we have these investments with $40 million in urban agriculture cooperative agreements, we're actually learning what are some priority programs. Some of those policies aren't federal policies. We're learning quite a bit of like how a city or county policy pays and requires water to get covered, and electricity payments, and then what are local and monitoring local county and city zoning requirements that are outside of federal. But having these partnerships and these cooperative agreements, they can actually share amongst each other to think about education that we provide to complement the federal work.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Wanda?
I know we have like about 10 minutes. We have one question in the chat room, so I'm going to let you go with Ms. Johnson, that I can read the questions to you.
All right. Okay. Wanda, could you answer that question? Okay.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. What are the challenges of urban agriculture as far as a county extension agent? And basically, what are you currently doing in reference to your projects within the rural area within Chase City and Mecklenburg?
Well, in Chase City and Mecklenburg County, we currently have 2 projects that were initiated a couple of years ago. One is a community garden in a low-income community, as well as a double-acre lot. 2 vacant lots were donated for the establishment of an edible landscape, which we're calling a food forest. And this is to benefit the community with fresh fruits and vegetables, herbs, and also flowers for aesthetic purposes. These gardens are not only in place to help people have additional food on their tables, they're also meant to bring people together to help educate them about being a part of a community, being a part of a team that produces food, having the experience of seeing something grow that you have from a seed that you have put in the ground and nurtured and helped to maintain. And out of those skills in terms of gardening and producing, we learn about nutrition, we learn about supporting one another. There are companion plants. I think in my work, I like to use my human resource development background with my agricultural background to go back and forth between explaining how both humans and plants have certain basic needs. And as you know, with plants, it starts with a good soil. With people, it starts with a good heart. And when you are compassionate about people, you care about people, you care about their well-being. And so we like to encourage a healthy lifestyle by growing fruits and vegetables, emphasizing the importance of vegetables that are grown locally in terms of the nutritional value to the overall health benefit of the community, as well as highlighting farmers and the work that they do in putting food on our table. And so a community garden, an edible landscape, is a small microcosm that we can use as a training ground to educate people about what goes on a larger scale in terms of farming. A lot of people are intimidated about growing things, or they really don't know what's involved. So we can show them various ways of growing, whether it's a no-till, no-dig, raised beds, container gardening. There is a variety of ways to grow food. I also have the opportunity to distribute seeds to schools, organizations, individuals, producers, farmers. These are seeds that have been given out through Burpee and other seed companies. And so by putting seeds in the hands of people, it only increases the opportunity for them to have that experience of growing food and benefiting from the food.
Oh, and Ralph, I know we have like 5 minutes, and there's one
right.
question in
Okay.
the chat. I want to make sure that
Go ahead,
we
Masood.
get to it in less than 90 seconds. I think this might be for the deputy undersecretary, and I'm going to read the question. It says, "How is an equity lens applied to the distribution of grants and funding in the organization?" And the other part of that question is, what measures are in place to educate employees about historical discrimination and to bring in farmers that have lost benefits due to unfair policies?
So I'll do my best for the equity lens applied to distribution, grants, and funding. Some of it's targeting, right? To be able to better say, if we're doing competitive funds, it's how are we educating and engaging? Risk management agency, I'll use an example, decided to do some work on how they actually got a contractor to help people write these proposals, right? Because I'm sitting in a federal family, and sometimes it's hard if you're not used to writing federal grants, it's going to be hard. The other is when we did the partnership for climate smart commodity, we did have expectations that that was something that we were going to measure, but we didn't just put it in our notice of funding of opportunity. We also set up conversations and collaborations so folks could understand and meet other equity communities to better have relationships begin to establish. So we've been trying to put it in different ways, like how if we're seeing a request for information and complete communities aren't included and aren't participating, what are tools that we can use to be able to continue to engage with them to get that feedback into the process? Because most of these funding opportunities and the federal government start with like writing insight. And so sometimes it's like, who didn't show up for the RFI process? And we got to make sure to lean in a little bit more and why didn't they? Now, with regards to educating employees, we have it in different ways, like specifically the assignments of learning and spaces. We've been doing a lot of customer experience training because that's some of it, like how are you engaging? Some of it's the redesigning of programs, how we've been thinking about farm loan and doing some underwriting work to remove some of the discretionary items. So it's the employee education, but it's also like, can we think about program design to remove any type of discrepancy, which discrepancy can lead to discrimination, right? And so, and then each agency within FPAC and most agencies within USDA have a robust equity action plan, and that's our roadmap for getting work done. We also have an equity commission that just came out. It is made of members that probably have been the strongest critiques of USDA for several decades that gave us a roadmap of expectations of where we need to improve it. So the secretary, the deputy secretary, and throughout all of USDA, we're regularly reminding people that that is a roadmap for us to be able to follow on improving how we think of access to programs.
Masood, can I ask one more question?
Yes, go ahead. And there's one question for Ms. Johnson if we're able to get to it, but I doubt it.
Okay.
But go ahead.
Okay. How can, as a sister agency, how can EPA actually assist USDA in reference to, you know, everything that's going on within the within your programs and in reference to loans and grants and so forth and so on? How can we assist?
Yeah, so I think there's as part of it, right? Like we all have our stronger relationships sometimes. So one of the great things that parts of USDA, we are not a regulatory arm. So sometimes people are more likely to listen to FSA and NRCS than EPA, right? And sometimes folks will most likely listen to EPA, especially with some of the investments you have. I think it's a co-collaboration, right? If you are out working in an agriculture space, and I know that some of the other panels, is to be able to think of, if they say, oh, you know, that's not how USDA is, like, have you thought about having a new conversation with them and engaging, right? They have changed some things on loans. They have some different expectations. And if they're like, for example, an urban farm, because you guys are doing lead lead pipe replacement, or some PFAS work to say, there actually might be some opportunities for you in this beautiful urban farm that you have at USDA, because I know that they've just done some new programs. So I would say if there are regular questions you're getting from agriculture communities, it might just be good to ask it. EPA just created a new Office of Agriculture, right? I think you guys set it up specifically, and there's a lot of robust collaboration there on key programs, but I think we are all still doing trust building, and trust is continuous work. So how we can collaborate in that sharing of information and sharing, like, hey, EPA might be helpful for you and here's why, just the same way you guys could say USDA might be helpful and here's why.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this session. I want to thank Ms. Wanda Johnson for joining us today, and then Deputy Undersecretary. I want to thank you and your staff. Jessica, you've been really helpful in making sure that we get you on board. Thanks for everyone. Thank you for joining this
You're
session.
welcome.
And
You're welcome.
thanks, Ra, for facilitating this session. All right.
All right.
Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Likewise.